What inspired you to write this piece?
I was having a meal with a coach I know, and we started talking about this mutual friend we had, and I had no idea this guy had another skill, that he was this amazing signal stealer, and it started to go down that
College or
route.
NFL?
This guy has mostly worked in college. He did work in the NFL briefly,
Okay,
for a little bit, a couple of years. But the more we talked about it, I was like, well, I don't know if this guy's ever going to want to even anonymously talk about what he does and how he does it. I was like, why would he want to do that? But then when I approached this person, he was like, yeah, I'll talk to you. And we had, I don't know, 3 long hour conversations at a time and started to go down that rabbit hole. And then the further I got, the more I was like, okay, how widespread is this? And so I started calling other coaches, and then I wanted to see the comparison between that and the NFL and talk to guys who worked in both. And then it's just fascinating. The more you talk to another couple guys and they go, you need to talk to this guy. He's awesome at it. Like, he's the best I've ever worked with. And you find out how that guy did it, and talk to guys in the NFL. And it was so fascinating to me on so many different levels, because it's been going on for so long. And some of the stuff you're like, okay, that's kind of elementary. How could you not figure that out, kind of thing? But it happens so fast. And in college, the players can't retain that much. It's not like it's their only job all the time. So some of the signals can be pretty basic, but then there's a lot of stuff, when you see in college, you have like 3 different signalers. And my signal stealer guy explained to me, he goes, it's actually not as hard as you think it would be.
Why not?
He goes, you are studying body language. And he goes, these guys are not actors. They're football players. They're trying to play football. So maybe they're turning away when one guy stops. Well, that's the guy, or the guy who's live is the one who's like kind of, his body language ends up coming out a little further. There's just lots of little
a step before the other 2 guys.
Yeah, there's just lots of little things that you're studying.
What about these signs of, like, now they're, Chip Kelly, who's here in UCLA, kind of started the holding up the faces, like Scott Van Pelt's face is up there, and then there's all sorts of actors and actresses. Is that all? And then now they're holding up sheets. There's sheets being held up.
Well, the sheets were trying to block people. So Arizona State, when Todd Graham was head coach, had a pretty bad reputation, or a pretty elaborate reputation for being very aggressive as signal stealers. So the sheets were trying to block people, just like when you'd see, the NFL coach holding the Denny's menu in front of him to try to do that. I had one guy tell me, he said, I was charting plays, and I didn't know it, but one of my friends who I knew really well later in the season goes, we're watching you. He's like, yeah. He goes, no, we can tell from what you're doing if it's going to be a run or pass. The run plays are a lot shorter. The pass plays are a lot longer. And he's like, yeah, that makes sense. So it's now I'm like scribbling and dummy stuff. I mentioned that to another guy I know from the NFL side, and he said, what we would do is we would have the 3rd string quarterback who's supposed to be charting plays. He would tell it to a guy who's probably on the practice squad and not in uniform. He's writing something down. I'm in front of him, and they have somebody standing behind him to kind of shield. So it's like, wow. And just when you think the coaches could not be more paranoid, you find out there's a reason why they're paranoid. I had one head coach tell me when he was an assistant somewhere, he said, we won a conference championship because the day before the game, one of our assistants happened to be watching the local news, and they saw like a local reporter doing a stand-up, and they watched, like in the background, they could see the offense running a short yardage play and kind of going through their walkthrough. And he's like, I bet you this is what they're going to run on, 3rd and inches. And it's exactly what they ran. And you could see, like, I went back and watched the actual play. This is from 5 years ago or so, and you can see them blow it up.
The Rich Eisen Show, weekdays at noon Eastern on Audience.